So a couple of very pleasant days here in Tenerife, and it's time now to go back to a locked down UK, or England to be precise. Travelling again on Wizz Air, and as I always say, I wouldn't normally cover the return leg of a flight when it's so similar to the outbound, but given all of the kerfuffle going on at the moment, it's well worth seeing how Spanish airport handles the departure and how Gatwick handles the arrival. So come with me.
Hi, I'm Matt. Over the last 25 years, I've travelled a lot. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.3 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So hit subscribe to see where I go next, and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip.
As I head through Tenerife South's very pleasant terminal towards security, let me talk about Wizz Air. In the video I made about my outbound flight, linked below, I talked about how aggressive they can be in charging for extras. Well, I think Wizz Air tried to trick me into incurring a fee with them. Let me explain. Wizz will charge you for checking in at the airport. £9.50 if you start the process online, £28 if you do the entire process at the airport. I'm okay with that, as I generally prefer to only pay for services I use, and I'm very happy to check myself in. As you can see, not a lot was open landside, even though there were quite a few flights departing. The day before this flight, I got a notification through the Wizz Air app explaining that electronic boarding cards were not allowed at Tenerife South's airport. I can't show it as the message has disappeared from the app, but it was clear that I would need to obtain a physical boarding pass. Receiving this when you're already overseas is quite inconvenient, as it meant that unless I could access a printer, I'd have no choice but to complete check-in at the airport and incur a fee. I smelt a rat, and 10 seconds on Google duly revealed that electronic boarding cards could be used at the airport. I downloaded a PDF of the boarding document from the Wizz app onto my phone, which as you can see worked fine on the 2 occasions it was needed when transiting the airport. So, Wizz told me something that was not true, and in doing so, when I was already travelling, created a problem that most passengers would solve by paying Wizz more money. I'm always inclined to give people and companies the benefit of the doubt, but there's one more angle that makes that difficult in this case. In the 10 days between making my booking and taking my return flight, Wizz sent me 13 emails. 3 to sell me baggage upgrades, 3 about Spanish arrival requirements, 3 about UK arrival formalities, 2 about which Gatwick terminal to use, and 2 on general virus stuff. I'm okay receiving all of those, but none of them warned me that my return airport prohibited electronic boarding passes. Doing so would have allowed me to print the pass from the comfort of home before departing, as Wizz allows you to check in 30 days before travel. It would have been very easy for a warning to be emailed, and the fact that it wasn't leads me to the conclusion that Wizz Air knew what it was doing and structured things to maximise their fee income at the expense of their customers' convenience. Back to the journey. Through security into the duty-free shops. Not particularly great pricing from what I spot-checked, and nowhere near as cheap as the shops in town. Tenerife is in the Schengen area, and so would typically have a secondary passport check for passengers before leaving that area. These create jeopardy as to whether food and retail options are better before or after the passport point, but in Tenerife South's case, passport checks are done at the gate, which kept things simple. A lot of retail was shuttered, as was most of the food court. A few options were open though, although my final choice of dining provider will remain between me and my cardiologist. Heavy sun blinds got in the way of the view, but it's always nice to see your plane arriving on time. I travelled back on the first day of the second English lockdown. I'd heard that quite a few people visiting Tenerife had decided to extend their stays rather than go back to the UK, some deciding to stay for the entire duration of the lockdown. The gate was quiet and the flight ended up being less than a third full. Boarding was a little slow as the agents were checking passports as well as boarding passes, many of which I noticed were electronic.
Hello sir, thank you very much.
Across the tarmac to the plane, so we got one last dose of vitamin D. Our plane was a 2.5-year-old Airbus A320, actually the same one we'd flown down on, which is perhaps not a complete shock as Wizz Air only operates a couple of planes from Gatwick. I paid £35.99p for the flight, including the admin fee, which was actually more than the outbound flight had cost, despite being a much emptier flight. A symptom, I think, of how volatile the air industry is right now. Plus £18 for the emergency exit row. Still not exactly limitless legroom, but plenty. As the plane was so empty, the crew did check that those of us sitting in these rows had actually paid for them, although people did move into them after takeoff. Very comfortable though. I'd gambled that the view would be on the starboard side on the way out, and I'd lost. I'd hedged my bets for the return flight with a port side seat, and I lost again. Let me know in the comments if you prefer these sequences with more or less wing in shot, or indeed whether they are so dull I should ditch them completely. Our flight took exactly 4 hours, taking us through the Canary Islands, across the Atlantic, clipping Spain and France. We got a decent view of Guernsey before crossing back into the UK overhead Worthing. Wizz is the only airline I've used in this pandemic that retains an in-flight magazine made of clean paper, whatever that is. I guess passengers can always choose not to touch it, although it does contain the in-flight menu. That allowed the service to remain pretty much as it was before all of this. I can't imagine there are many aircraft where the 3 languages chosen for the seat safety notices are English, Hungarian and Bulgarian. There was a toilet at the front and 2 more at the back. Very small and tricky to film when you fill perhaps 50% of the space's volume. As you can see, the plane was pretty empty. Great for the passengers, not so great for the airline. If you've made it this deep into the video, I'll assume you're enjoying it, and you can help support the channel by liking this video, subscribing if you're new, and by leaving me a comment. And in the description below I'll put a link to the mask extender I used during this flight, and also there are links to the gizmos I've used in making this video. Click on those and that will help me out too. All my flights that have landed in the UK have included an announcement from the UK health authorities. These have been delivered with varying levels of enthusiasm and commitment by the crew, and this was about average.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. The following is the public health message on behalf of the UK's public health agencies. The symptoms of coronavirus are new continued cough, a high temperature, loss of or change in normal sense of taste or smell. If you experience any of these symptoms, however mild, you are advised to make yourself known to the crew. Simple measures you can take to help protect yourself and your family are...
I was concerned on a recent Ryanair flight that inaccurate information was given about the need to self-isolate on arrival in the UK. Well, don't you know it, Wizz Air had exactly the same script.
You must also self-isolate for the first 14 days after you arrive.
And the same wrong information. That day, the information was wrong for a different reason though, as England was now under a 28-day lockdown. It is very frustrating that the airlines and the UK government can't get their act together to give accurate information to passengers. So we landed. Unlike the outbound flight, the crew made an announcement in an attempt to stream passengers off the plane by row.
After door opening, we will disembark row by row, starting with the seat closest to the door.
And we did all diligently remain seated when the bing bongs binged. And when the doors opened, all that was forgotten and the charge for the door began.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may now disembark using the forward door for the moment, but we will open soon the back door and we will disembark from the aft part of the aircraft as well.
It wasn't too bad though, as we were all fairly socially distanced, given the low load on the plane. Credit to Gatwick is due. As with the last time I transited, there was a very harassed man controlling access to the passport lines, ensuring we'd all completed a passenger locator form. Neither Heathrow nor Stansted had done that. I understand that there is no automated system to check that the locator form had been completed, so without airport intervention of this type, a very large number of passengers may get through without completing a form. That day was the first day of a new lockdown in England, so I expected there to be some communication about the new rules that applied. But there was nothing. No leaflets, no announcements, no help desks, nothing. Gatwick was very quiet though, as non-business related travel had actually been made illegal by the law that came into force that day. So back to the South Terminal where I parked the car. The guy in the car will wrap up the Wizz Air service, but before I throw to him, I want to return to Wizz's aggressive charging strategy. I still think, on balance, that Wizz knew what it was doing in misleading me about electronic boarding passes at a point in my travels when I'd almost certainly have to pay them money to fix a non-existent problem. I'm an experienced traveller with a well-developed sense of what makes sense and what doesn't, so I'm confident about not being ripped off by Wizz Air or anyone else, but I struggle to endorse any service provider who may try to deceive and rip off their customers. But on reflection, I'm going to give Wizz the benefit of the doubt, albeit with encouragement that they should work harder to be fair, honest, effective and accurate with their passengers. Over to me in the car, and before anyone comments, I did learn something about lighting when filming this sequence, specifically that I should have some. So, back in the car. Good to get that thing off, finally. Back in the UK, day one of England's second lockdown. Eerily quiet, even though it's only just begun. So Wizz Air, to summarise, I liked them. Friendly staff, good service, nice new shiny planes, on time. It was good. I have a philosophy though, that if you're the only person doing something, you're either a genius or an idiot. And Wizz Air are the only people with in-flight magazines. And I think that probably goes on the idiot end of the scale for them. They also made the misdeclaration about 14 days of self-isolation. Yesterday, that would have been wrong. Today, it's wrong, but for a different set of reasons. It's actually almost half right, as we've got 28 days of lockdown, which is effectively self-isolation ahead of us. But either way, it's the sort of thing that they should be getting right. And finally, kudos to Gatwick for actually checking that people had filled in their passenger locator forms. Stansted and Heathrow hadn't done that when I passed through, so that puts Gatwick at the top of that list. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Give me a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. So until the next time, whenever that may be, I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.